So, today we're going to dig into a new study that points to this surprising and honestly really personal reason why so many students think about leaving school. And trust me, it's probably not what you think.
All right, so let's get right into it. When you hear about students dropping out, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, our brains immediately jump to a few usual suspects. Yeah, we all know this list, right? For years, all the research really zeroed in on these external pressures, things like bad grades, not having enough money, or maybe not getting the right academic help. And look, those are absolutely real, major issues. But they don't tell the whole story, not even close. So what if one of the biggest reasons, the real game changer, isn't about grades or money at all? What if it's something internal, something we can't really see on a report card, a hidden feeling that's just quietly pushing students right out the door?
Okay, before we go any further, let's just be super clear about why this is such a big deal. Dropping out of school isn't just some individual choice, you know? It's a huge societal problem with some really serious, long-lasting consequences.
And I mean, the fallout is massive. We're talking about everything from a person's future income and their physical health to their overall mental well-being. It affects, well, everything. That's why getting to the root of why this happens is so important.
And that brings us right to the core of this new study. The researchers decided to look past all those usual suspects and focus on something much more personal, a really powerful subjective experience, that feeling of loneliness.
Okay, so let's be really specific about what we mean by loneliness here. It's not just about being by yourself. It's that awful, gut-wrenching feeling you get when there's a gap, a mismatch between the social connections you wish you had and the ones you actually have. It's all about the quality of those relationships, not just the number of people around you. So how do you even measure something like that? Well, the researchers got pretty smart about it. They asked students about these really specific, very human feelings. Things like, how often do you feel like you're missing a companion? How often do you feel left out? Or just isolated from everyone else? These questions get right to the emotional heart of what loneliness actually feels like. So what do they find? Well, the results, they were pretty staggering. Get this, a whopping 56.6%, that's more than half of all first-year university students had thought about dropping out. Just let that sink in. More than half. That number is way higher than most people would ever guess.
Which of course leads to the million-dollar question. So what's the link? Where does loneliness fit into this puzzle?
And here it is. This is the big one. The study found that lonely students were 2.5 times more likely to consider dropping out. 2.5 times. And that wasn't just in university, it was true for high school students too. This shows a massive, undeniable connection. And it turns out, this isn't just a random feeling that pops up once. The data shows this clear pattern that actually follows students from one school to the next.
So check out this comparison. In high school, about a quarter of students had thought about dropping out. But then, in that first year of university, that number more than doubles. It just explodes. This really highlights how that transition to a new place, often far from your friends and family, is such a critical, and for many, a really isolating time.
And here's another piece of the puzzle that is just wow. Students who considered dropping out back in high school were 3.5 times more likely to have those exact same thoughts again in university. That pattern is just incredibly strong. So what does all this tell us? The big takeaway is this. Dropping out is almost never a split-second decision. It's a process. It's something that builds up over a long time, often starting way before a student even gets their university acceptance letter. These feelings, these thoughts, they have a history. All right, so we've laid out this huge problem. The obvious next question is, what do we do about it? Well, the research points to a really proactive solution, one that's all about building connection. One really interesting idea is something called social prescribing. Now, I know that sounds a bit clinical, but think of it like this. Instead of a doctor giving you medicine, the school prescribes a connection. They actively help a student link up with clubs or sports teams or community groups. It's such a cool approach because it's a structured solution to a social problem. It's about building those pathways to connection that some students really struggle to find on their own. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to creating a real, genuine sense of belonging. And the research lays out 4 key ways to do that. First, helping students build supportive friendships. Second, making sure they have real, meaningful interactions with teachers and staff. Third, helping them build an identity for themselves as a successful student. And finally, making sure what they're learning actually feels relevant to their future. You know, there's a quote in this study that just hits the nail on the head. It says that the main reason students leave is because they don't have a strong sense of belonging. Belonging isn't just some fluffy, nice-to-have thing. It's everything. When students feel like they're on the outside looking in, they're so much more likely to leave. But when they feel like they're part of something, they stick around and they thrive.
And that really leaves us with a final, really important question to think about. We live in this super connected digital world, right? We're talking through screens all day, so how do we intentionally create spaces in our schools and our communities that build the kind of real human connection that this research proves is just so absolutely vital for success?